Hey guys, BuildZoid here, and so I'm just like smashing through a bunch of memory overclocking on Z390 motherboards right now. You're like these videos are getting put into a pile of stored videos. So by the time you see this, I may not have this motherboard anymore. Because I want to get rid of I have too many motherboards, and I've decided I need to clear out the Z390 boards. So I'm trying to just kind of get everything I wanted to get done, and then they're gonna go, and everything's gonna be awesome. So, anyway, here we have a what I consider very mild, like nice casual Samsung B-die memory overclock. We're running a Kingston HyperX kit. This is a 3600 CL17 kit. I'm using it because it's not the best B-die I have. So intentionally, I'm restricting myself to something that might be closer to what you actually have, what you actually end up buying. It's let's see, what can I say about it? It's rated at 3600 CL17. They don't sell this bin anymore, so you can't buy this because back when I bought this kit, the full bin is 3600 17 18 18. They still sell a 3600 CL17 bin of 2x8. But that is now 17, 19, 19, and 17, 19, 19 at 3600 megahertz, you're probably going to get Hynix CJR, not B-die anymore. Like, you're not going to get B-die in that speed bin. So, yeah, I wouldn't, like, you can't actually buy this anymore, but B-die is B-die, so, you know, that's why I'm using this. Even though you won't be able to specifically pick this up, this should be very similar to what you would see from like a 3200 CL14 kit might hit a very similar overclock. A 3616 kit might hit a very similar overclock. A 4000 CL19 kit should hit a very similar overclock. So, yeah. Well, not necessarily. The 4000 megahertz kit wouldn't actually be overclocked. It would just hit similar timings. So anyway, as you can clearly see, we have HCI Mem Test running. It's run out to over 300%. If you want really if you want to do like full daily stability checks, you should be running it out to like 400%. Also, you should be testing with, elevated thermals because memory is relatively temperature sensitive. Not in the sense that if it runs hot, it'll die or something. It just gets unstable if it gets too hot because, operating temperatures change timing parameters for memory sticks and that kind of thing. So, anyway, we're on the open air test bench. I don't really have a fan sitting on top of the RAM, so it's not like there's a ton of airflow, but this is still going to be, better memory. Like, the thermals that the memory is running at are going to be better than probably what you're going to end up in your hot box of an RGB case. So, it's just like... Also, if you're playing video games, and you have a high-power GPU, it's going to cook everything in the system. So, those are some stability testing considerations that, well, I'm ignoring here because I want to get through a bunch of memory overclocks quickly. So anyway, Mem Test, as you can see, has passed up to 300%. So I would consider this relatively stable. Yeah, I'm not going to run it all the way to 400% because that just takes too long. Now we're just going to quickly do an IDA. Yay. Okay, so I was worried that... Anyway. So we're just going to do a quick IDA run for memory latency, read, write. The motherboard, the Z390-A from ASUS, which is the motherboard we're using here. This is a T-topology motherboard, though I have to say this is not a very similar T-topology to what you would get on Gigabyte, because for me this board actually doesn't really play very well with 4-DIMM configuration. Like, it works better with 2 DIMMs than it works with 4 DIMMs. It's not a huge difference, but it's there, and it's, in my opinion, kind of annoying. Anyway, so our latency is what I would consider very, like, not great by, Z390 standards. If you're if you want to hit the limits of what you can do in terms of memory latency on Z390, you can go as low as like 35 nanoseconds quite easily, but you're going to need an ITX motherboard. As far as I can tell, because both the Z390-A and the Z390 Aorus Master from Gigabyte, they're both hitting around this latency, and I think it's because mostly because of the fact that they both use T-topology layouts, and that basically means your I/O latencies are really, like, the DIMMs are physically further away from the CPU, so that adds a bit of delay. So, and also you just the timings you can run and the frequency you can run is just restricted by the memory topology that we're looking at here. Anyway, for read speed, we should be getting around 60 gigs. Or, well, 60,000 megabytes. somebody's going to complain that technically that's not a gigabyte because it's not 10 to the 1024. Anyway, so yeah, 60,000 megabytes per second read. We should be getting a little over 60,000 megabytes right as well. Yeah, so 61,000 megabytes right. Yeah, so that's the performance. The overclock is actually 4,000 megahertz CL17. Just going to restart, and we're going to go into the BIOS and go through the various settings that I'm running so that you can be inspired. Don't copy paste my settings, okay? That's not the point. Because a lot of the time, if you just try to copy paste a set of timings, they're not necessarily going to work. Though I will admit that I actually tested all of these timings on the Z390 ORS Master first, and then I just kind of copied them onto this board. Though there are some notable differences where the Master actually gets better memory bandwidth with, I think, these like similar settings to this, because it does a couple timings slightly better. It's not like a huge difference. I think it's like 500 or 200. Like it's if I remember correctly, the right test is basically slightly better, and that's it. Anyway, so here we are in the BIOS. CPU is just running a 5 gigahertz. Anyway, oh yeah, ASUS BIOS. So you're going to want to put your AI overclock tuner in anything but auto, so manual XMP1. You may find that with certain memory kits, having the XMP mode enabled improves the memory overclocking just because the motherboard is going to know how to deal with the memory kit better because it's actually loading the XMP profile instead of going from JADEC settings. Anyway, so the XMP is enabled. You know, we're on the profile that the memory comes with. It actually has two profiles. One of them sucks more than the other. You know, MC is disabled. SVID behavior is on auto because we actually disable SVID anyway. 0 AVX offset, which just... like, more and more programs are going to use AVX more and more. So at some point, if you have an AVX offset, your CPU is just never going to hit the overclock that you set if you have the AVX offset enabled. At which point it's like, well, why do you even bother with... like, what's the point of punching 5.1 gigahertz down here if you're going to have a 200 megahertz AVX offset and every workload you run uses AVX? Right, like even just a little bit of AVX, because it doesn't matter how much AVX there is. It's the CPU detects any AVX instructions and it's going to downclock. So you have one thread of AVX stuff running in the background. Whole system is underclocked by 200 megahertz if you have a offset of 2 for your AVX. So I don't do AVX offsets anyway. So down here we have the memory frequency set to 4,000 megahertz. So yeah. That's the frequency we're at. There's your SVID disable. Digi plus VRM. Here I just have like level 5 LLC, which is the optimal LLC for this this VRM. This is disabled because we're not using adaptive mode. 140% card capability. It doesn't go any higher. So yeah, VRM spread spectrum disabled. Active just leave that disabled because actually that just enables spread spectrum again. So. And then these are on auto, like that's just what they default to. And VRM switching frequency you can leave on auto. You don't get a benefit from trying to increase it. If anything, if you crank up the switching frequency, you just make the VRM run hotter. It doesn't really do anything for the voltage regulation. Internal CPU power management. I just have the power limits maxed out, so that's all that's going on there. Then down here for voltages, we have 45 ratio for the Uncore. The more cache clock you want to run, the more like so the cache actually runs off of the vCore power rail. So if you're trying to minimize how much vCore you need to run, you may find that lowering your cache clock significantly reduces your vCore requirements. Which is why I'm not running like, it might be possible for me to run like 4.8 gigahertz cache, but the cache really, unless your cache is like horrifically underclocked, it doesn't make that much of a performance difference. It doesn't make as much of a performance difference as, say, a 100 megahertz CPU clock. So, running even the 4.3, which is like the stock cache clock for a 9900K, like running that and then just running a higher CPU ratio at a lower core voltage will generally perform better than having higher cache and lower CPU clocks, right? So that's kind of that. DRAM voltage, we're just mashing 1.5 volts into this because it's BDI, and yeah, I just don't care. I mean, I could probably try to, minimize the voltage a bit, but I don't care. It's BDI. We're going to shove 1.5 volts into it. Obviously, if you have a less than ideal thermal environment, then the higher voltage obviously makes the thermal situation worse, slightly. So that is something to consider. But yeah, like, you know, you saw the Mem test. It was 300%. There's no fan on the no fan on the actual memory sticks. So yeah, I'm just going with this as like 1.5 volts makes the system happy. VCCIO at 1.2 volts. This CPU doesn't really like high VCCIO. Like I've tried on like in other memory overclocks, I've tried higher VCCIO, and it's fine if you're just going for like I want to do benchmarks, but if you actually want stability, high VCCIO, and this CPU just starts not being stable at all. System agent is at 1.3 volts. I was considering bumping this even higher because I wanted to run a lower TRCD, but then I was just like, I'm not shoving 50 millivolts more SA just for the sake of 1 tick of TRCD. So, yeah, 1.3 volts, which is about 50 millivolts below the, what is it? Maximum that you should like daily your system agent at. It might also be possible to run it lower at the current settings. It's just like 1.2, 1.3 has been working. Like I've been using these two voltages across a bunch of motherboards at this point with a variety of different memory overclocks. They're very stable, and I just can't be bothered to run it at anything else because of that. So anyway, let's talk about the actual timings. So here are the timings. We're at 16, 18, 36. For the primaries, 2-tick command rate, 1T. I actually tried 1T at 3600 megahertz. It doesn't do it at even 3600 megahertz. So, yeah, which really surprised me because generally ASUS boards tend to be a bit better about doing 1T command rate, but no. This just 1T at 3600 just doesn't work. 4.4 for the TRRDs. They don't go any lower. Well, you can try punch in lower values, but they don't improve your performance. 300 megahertz TRFC because... also, yeah, ASUS has, well, actually, no, they do have the abbreviations for the timings down here. So, yeah, 300 TRFC, it could probably go maybe 20, 40 ticks lower, so we could probably run 280 or 260, but I'm too lazy. So, 300 is, like, relatively high for Samsung B-Die, but you get most of the performance benefit at 300 already. So it's just like, I don't see a point pushing it another, 20, 40 ticks and then fighting with the memory stability where it's like, oh, it's 20 ticks too low and now it's erroring after about after 100% or something. So yeah, DRAM refresh interval, so TREFI, 36,000. You don't have to set these two. You can, like the TRFC2 and TRFC4, you can just set on auto. Leave those on auto, but refresh interval 36,000. It could probably go higher. With TREFI, the higher the better because it's the gap between your refresh cycles, right? So refresh cycle is just, well, I'm not going to try to explain what it is. I can't remember it. Like, I can't remember the correct technical terminology, but basically, while the RAM is refreshing, it can't do anything. So you want to put as much of a delay between refreshes as possible. The problem is, if you have too much of a gap between your refresh cycles, you start losing data because memory is volatile. So it has to refresh to RAM is a volatile memory store. It's volatile memory, so you need to refresh it every so often. So this indicates how frequently how frequently it gets refreshed. This is how long it gets refreshed for. So anyway, 36,000. It might go up to 40,000, might go up to 44,000, but this is a nice, like, around 32,000 almost always works. So that's why we're at 36,000, and I can't be bothered to test any higher, even though it might give us some small performance gains if we went further. TWR at 16, I'm just matching the TCL. I tried messing around with TWR recently to see what kind of performance impacts it has, and IDA wasn't really showing any benefits to having it like really low or really high, so it's just like, okay, we'll just leave it at 16. That seems to work just fine. RTP, just 10, it's stable. This is very much like most of these timings are just guess and test. Like I will literally go through the timings. Like you could read up the definitions from JDEC for what every single timing does. That doesn't really help you set them to their optimal values. It'll stop you from doing silly things like setting your TRRD below 4, right? It'll prevent you from doing that because it says in the JDEC specifications the minimum value is 4. So it'll do that kind of thing. So you won't make like mistakes where it's just like your timings don't make any sense. At the same time, you don't need to know, like for a lot of timings, it's just like lower it by 1 tick. If the performance improves, lower it another tick and just keep doing that until performance stops improving. Anyway, then we have 4 active window, which is just, should just be your TRRD times 4. most of the time it'll work at 16. Well, for BDI, it'll basically always work at 16. So there's no reason to run it at anything other than 16, in my opinion. But yeah, with some other memory ICs, you might have to actually run a TFAW that isn't 16, especially at higher frequencies. Then we have write to read delay and write to long and short. So those are set to 8.4, but this motherboard doesn't actually like setting these, which is really annoying. TCKE 1 and DRAM write latency of 14. And this might, on some memory sticks that are really good, you might be able to run 12. On bad memory sticks, you might be forced to run it at the same frequency, at the same timing as your CAS latency. So CAS right now is, we're at 16 CAS latency. This is CAS write latency. So, normally it can do 2 ticks less, or maybe even 4, like it can do a few ticks less than CAS latency, but in some cases you might be forced to run it at the same number of ticks as your CAS latency. So if you're running 16, 18, 36 primaries, then here you'd be running 16 as well, potentially. But this memory kit's happy with 14, and I'd assume most decent BDI memory kits should be happy with 14 at even 4,000 megahertz. Anyway, what else did I want to mention? Oh yeah, ASUS actually merges the RAS and TRP timings. So that's why we don't have, like, normally you have CAS latency, TRCD, TRP. Here we have TRCD and TRP merged into line timing, which is fine, because on Z390 you can't actually set them separately. MSI and Gigabyte motherboards allow you to set them separately, but that doesn't actually work. Like, it'll just go to whichever one is higher, I think. Anyway, so yeah, and the WTR, so this WTRL and WTRS, so the write to read delays, ASUS doesn't let you set them directly there. So even though I have values punched in, what's actually configuring them is where is it? These two right here. So those are set to 28 and 24. Which there's a rule for how the math works out on these. I don't remember it. Basically what I do is I go into Windows, I look at what the motherboard defaults these to relative to the WTRs. Right, actually I'll demonstrate it. So if we punch in auto, I'm just going to set those to auto, and I'll demonstrate how I do that. So anyway, but right now they're set to 28, 24, and that's how you get the 4.8 for the WT, well, 8.4. I hate how ASUS has their like their timings are laid out completely different from everybody else. Like if you look at their tertiaries, instead of having them in groups of like all of your read to reads together, all of your read to writes together, they have first the same group, different group, same group, different group, same group, different group timings together, and then they have all the different rank, different dim timings together. Anyway, for the tertiaries, you can basically just knock them down 1 tick at a time until they don't go any lower. I really recommend you save a profile before doing this, because sometimes you'll be able to even get into the BIOS and it won't be stable. So yeah, these are literally like all of the tertiaries that I have set here are just guess and test. Except the WRRD and the WRRD, those are just set based on that. I know that the WTR should be 8 and 4, right? For WTR long should be 8, WTRS should be 4. At 4,000 megahertz, that works pretty well. It might even go as low as 6.3, but 1 tick of time, 1 or 2 ticks of basically any timing after you've already fixed, like if you go from JDEC to any something similar to what I have here, you get a pretty nice performance boost. But going further than this doesn't tend to make much of a difference, because now you're doing like 1 or 2 tick adjustments. Though the tertiaries, there are some decent improvements here, because I think the board actually defaults like like these, the 12.12 and the 11.11 here. Those would default to like I think 16 or something with this board, which actually, like, the tertiaries primarily affect your memory bandwidth. They don't really do that much for your latency. So having lower tertiaries gives you more memory bandwidth, which, yeah. So otherwise we'd have a bit less memory bandwidth than what I have now. Anyway, and then we have 7766, and this is again just guess and test for these four at the bottom. And then the rest of this is just auto. There's really nothing else I would mess with here. Because it'll generally not really do that much for your actual memory overclocking. So anyway, let's go over the WTR effects. So as I've just set them to auto, we're going to go into Windows. We're going to use the ASRock timing configurator. So ASRock timing configurator is a utility from ASRock. You can download it on, I'm not sure which, the OC series motherboard. So like go to any, I think the X299 OC formula is probably the most recent motherboard with the timing configurator. in the like downloads section of its web page. And yeah, you just download the timing configurator, and why is it not posting? Dumb board. Oh, there we go. Now it works. Well, maybe the capture card just dropped out. Anyway, so yeah, now we're just going to take a look at the ASRock timing configurator, and you can see that we have 16.6 and 36.26 right here, right? So if we want to adjust WTRS from 6 to 4, then we just need to knock this timing down over here by 2 ticks, right? Because like they're like they just add up. There's no like multiplication or anything. It's just addition. So if we take 2 ticks away from this, it'll take 2 ticks off of that. And we want to get this from 16 down to 8. So we have to take 8 away from that. So we take our 36 and we set it to, you know, 36 minus 8 is 28. So we just set that to 28 and 24. And that's where I got the 28 and 24 settings, right? So, yeah. Oh, and now our I/O latencies are a little bit better. I actually wonder if that improved the IDUS scores. So the funny thing is, if you mess with the tertiaries, you can, like, well, you can sometimes make the I/O latencies worse, and then your latency goes up, but your bandwidth goes, no, latency goes up, bandwidth also goes up, though, if you're lowering your tertiaries. Yeah, but the latency still sucks, so I don't care. So we're just going to knock it back down, because we're still around 39 nanoseconds, so it's just like, that's not worth it. Right, like a fraction of a nanosecond on the latency is just not going to make a real-world performance difference. I mean, arguably, you could also say the same for the bandwidth, and then it's just like, well, yeah, I guess. You don't have to bother with it. So, and actually, if we wanted to run 3.6 instead of 4.8, what we could do is we could punch in 23 and then 36 minus... so this is really dumb. The ASUS BIOS doesn't read out the values for this, which is just like, I don't know why. Like, come on. What the hell is that? But anyway, so yeah, we're going to set that one to 23, because 24 would have given us 4.8. Like, 24, 28 would give us 4.8. So 23 will give us 3. And then for the 6, if we punch in 28, we'll get 8 on the WTRL. But we want 6. So we're going to run 26, 23, and this very well may not post. Oh, and it's posting. So it might not necessarily be stable. It could also be stable. I swear this is the capture card derping out. It can't possibly be the... Yeah, it is the capture card derping out. What did I want to do? Right, ASRock timing configurator. There, so now you can see we have 3.6. Yay! And 26, 23, and now our I/O latencies are actually pretty decent, like they've stayed, so that's nice. These, okay, I think might be worth it to try lock them in at 12, 13, because otherwise sometimes the motherboard goes to 13, 14, and then the latency gets a bit worse. It's not a huge difference. The thing is, on like an ITX motherboard at like similar frequency, similar timings, on a good ITX motherboard, you might actually have I/O latencies of like 6, 7, or 7, 7 or something. So, yeah. I'm just going to run the latency test. And now we're getting 40 nanoseconds again. It might be a bit unstable at this point. So that'll also, like, if you're unstable, then that'll screw with, you know, performance testing as well. And also, IDA has, like, plus minus half a nanosecond worth of variance. So we actually lost memory bandwidth. I'm pretty sure it's really unstable right now. Okay, no, so here we're getting 60.5. Yeah, we lost about a gig of bandwidth on both well, okay, not about a gig, but about 500 megabytes on read and about a gig on write. Yeah, okay, now it's down a gig, so I'm pretty sure it's unstable at this point. So if we open up Mem Test and we run test 14 gigs, oh, it's not spitting out errors yet. Well, anyway, it's performing worse though, so it's not worth. So we're gonna go right back to, and Windows tab is better. Just have to make the motherboard smaller. It's probably unstable. It's just not showing up right now. So if we go back to the 2824, we'll go in and check the bandwidth again. And I didn't want this video to go over 30 minutes. Evidently, I'm going to fail at that. Board, could you please restart? Admittedly, that's on me for not closing Mem Test before telling it to restart, but, yeah. That's what you get for cutting corners, right? You cut the corner, and then it takes even longer. I'm going to go here. We're just going to go 28, 24, and that should fix it. Like, we should be back up to, you know, a little over 60 gigs and a little over 61.5 gigs bandwidth. Well, the latency should remain unchanged. So, yeah, memory overclocking is fun. You change numbers and other numbers change too. That's basically all there is to it. Capture card. Yeah. I need to stop, like, using a mile of I'm pretty sure the whole issue is that I'm using, like, a coupling for the HDMI cables instead of just having one long HDMI cable all the way. But the thing is, the big long HDMI cable is just really inconvenient compared to just using a bunch of couplings. But at the same time, it's just like, yeah, but the couplings are unreliable. Anyway, so we're just going to run IDA and also ASRock timing configurator. So now you can see we have 8.4, even though we didn't set them just because we configured 2824 there. So yeah, and this is a thing that actually, like, this is not the only motherboard where this happens, where you have to set these two to set these two. But on some motherboards, you know, you can actually set these and it works properly. And then on some motherboards, you have to set these two if you want to change these two. So anyway, memory latency. And also you'd have noticed in the timing configurator, our IO latencies are now up at 13 and 14. But I'm pretty sure our memory latency is still going to be around 39 nanoseconds. Because, yeah, it is around 39 nanoseconds. So it just doesn't matter that the IO latencies are like, they're really, really high. But ATX motherboards, what you going to do about that? Actually, it'd be really cool to see I'd like to try a daisy chain motherboard for the IO latencies, because I have a bunch of T-topology motherboards, and they all behave the same, except at low frequencies, you can actually get decent IO latencies. But at high frequencies, they just get really, really loose. And yeah, now we're getting 60 gigs, and here we should be getting 61.5, and yeah, we're getting about 61.5. So, yeah. Tertiaries basically configure your bandwidth, and then everything else is just kind of like, well, basically most of the timings just improve your memory bandwidth. That's most of them. You can get a little bit of a latency gain from you know, setting all of your secondaries properly, and you get a decent latency improvement from just like low TRFC, high TREFI. But yeah, for the most part, you're just going to be boosting your memory bandwidth. The biggest drops in latency you get from setting your primaries really low. So I wish we could run like 17 TRCD, but the thing is, the memory controller on the CPU with this motherboard just won't do it. In fact, at 4133 megahertz, Well, I think it's an ATX motherboard thing because technically on the ITX Z390 Phantom Gaming, I was able to mem test at like 17, 17, 17 primaries, but that's also a different memory kit. So the thing is, the TRCD, most BDI can do really low TRCD. But low TRCD is also a memory controller limit to a very large extent, where it's just like if you drop the TRCD too low, it might not be that the memory can't run it, it's often that the CPU can't deal with it. So yeah, and obviously if you have a motherboard with, like if you have an ITX motherboard with 2 DIMM slots instead of 4 DIMM slots, well, that takes a lot of load off of the memory controller, and then you can run lower TRCD, right? So that's kind of the thing, is just like ATX motherboards are bad for memory overclocking. Well, 4 DIMM motherboards are bad for memory overclocking. Daisy chains kind of, well, T topology is the worst for 2 DIMM configurations. Daisy chains are better for that. And then the thing is, T topology, even if you're running 4 DIMMs, really doesn't fix the TRCD thing, because once you're running 4 memory sticks, you're running dual rank, and then the memory controller, it's no longer complaining about your topology, it's complaining about the fact that you're running dual rank. So it's just like you fix one problem and you just have another one instead. Anyway, so that's it. That's it for this video. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. Hopefully this helps you with your own memory overclocking on ASUS Z390 motherboards. I will probably also do a video with this board and some Micron Rev E memory. Yeah, if you'd like to support what I do here with, so you should subscribe if you don't want to miss that. But yeah, also, if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon where you can support me directly. There's a link to that down in the description below. Thank you to the patrons for actually funding both the memory kit and the motherboard used for this video. And then I also have a Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, and that kind of YouTuber type merch stuff. Yeah, that also helps immensely with running the channel. So yeah, if you'd like to check out the links for both the Patreon and the Teespring store, there's links to, they're going to be in the description there. I'm very good with my words. I was like words. Anyway, I'll hit the stop button at this point. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.